So we have also one person who is unable to join us, who was on the panel, scheduled to be on the panel. And that was Kara from Nexo Ventures. So she won't be able to join. But I think I'm going to kick off because we are starting a little bit late and we do have a lot to cover. So welcome everyone. I am recording, as Devin said, so that other people, as they join or maybe switch rooms, they won't miss anything. So I'm very excited about this panel. It's a breakout session on how critical building a community is to your round. And we've gathered experts in the field. So we have a very strong panel to talk about how the power of your purpose as an issuer can build a community for your brand. And if that community is managed right, it can actually evolve into not only supporters, but customers and investors. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you do have a question, we're a relatively small group here. So if you have a question, by all means, raise your hand and I'll get to it as best I can. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to put everybody's LinkedIn in the chat. So you can check out the panel and connect with them when you get a chance. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. We have Brittany Bentley, and Brittany Bentley is the co-founder and chief creative officer of Parker Clay. And Parker Clay is committed to making a better bag for a better world. So their mission centers around if beautiful leather products can be made while creating jobs to empower vulnerable women and celebrate kind of traditional and sustainable and ethical craftsmanship all at once. Brittany has leveraged 20 years experience in cross-disciplinary design experience, and she plays an integral role at the Parker Clay story. So welcome, Brittany, and thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Cherry Rose Tan. Cherry Rose is a futurist. She's general partner at Renew Venture Capital, whose mission is to solve society's biggest challenges by purposely renewing how we invest in and help build companies, all while leading with empathy. Alongside a diverse and talented team of ex-operators, Cherry Rose brings expertise in early-stage B2B SaaS, network effect, and regulated industries like fintech and health tech. And lastly, we have Jonathan Stidd, who is the president of Dealmaker Reach. Jonathan leads the in-house agency tasked with investor acquisition for many of Dealmaker's issues, and he's a colleague and very respected peer in the space. Jonathan has over 15 years of experience. He's a subject matter expert in investor crowdfunding for forward-thinking founders and issuers, and specializes in kind of a smart cost of capital that combines building a brand and turning fans into customers and investors. So welcome, everyone. So I'm going to get us started right away with the first question, which is kind of tell our audience a little bit about your experience with raising capital and or investor crowdfunding, and how you've leveraged it for your brand. And I do want to start with Brittany from Parker Clay, if you can weigh in.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So we started this journey in November, which is a very busy time of year for us. It's when we bring in the most sales. It's the holidays. And so really at this time, our goal was to leverage our top customers, which are our VIPs. We call it VI Purpose. And we have always focused on this customer group from the beginning, and we share more of our impact reports with them. We share sales first with them. So really reaching out to them first with the crowdfund was a big deal in that season, because we felt they'd be the best to refer others in with the opportunity of gifting shares. So holiday instant gifts, gifting shares was a way to leverage it during that time period, which I would say we really wanted to do, but also was a little risky starting in the holidays with also having very much to focus on product sales.
Yeah. So it was kind of a reward tactic that you tested out.
Yes, we started out, I mean, we announced it to everyone, but we really knew we could not add any more noise with even the crowd fund. During that time period, our focus had to be on product sales and keeping that the focus, but at the same time, create that as a gifting opportunity. We weren't really out there to find a new community with the crowd fund. It was really to tap into our current closest group of customers and share really that they could give or be a part of or asked to receive a gift in that season that created a much larger impact than even another bag.
Yeah, great. That's a great example. So Cherry Rose, why don't you share kind of your purview as a VC and how you kind of think of community that way?
Yeah, for sure. By the way, great to be here in this session. I think where I want to first start in terms of sharing my story is that I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life, 5 generations of entrepreneurs, but my immediate family in particular, we are tech founders. And so I was very much on the operator side for 15 years before switching over to the VC side. I think one of the things I just want to acknowledge, and maybe this is speaking from my operator experience, is that when it comes to raising capital, in all honesty, my experience in the industry, I feel like, especially for a first-time founder, it doesn't feel obvious what are the steps, the resources that you actually need to be able to fundraise, and also the other pieces, like what are actually the rules of the game. And there's a lot of things I think that you get to learn, especially in the industry, about, oh, this is the way that VCs like the deck done. Oh, this is the way that the data room should be prepared, but there hasn't been a lot of transparency in the industry for a while. And so how community kind of ties into this, and a lot of the stuff that I'm passionate about, is that I'm a GP over at Renew Venture Capital. You know, as Leah mentioned, really our mission is about renewing the way that we invest in and help companies. And a lot of my passion is around what does it mean to demystify venture capital. And so kind of an interesting story around that is that my reputation in the tech industry as an ecosystem builder is really about mobilizing community to be able to share information, to share contacts that are not readily available. And so I got to really see this with the previous ecosystem that I was running, which is called Schulich Startups. Currently, the entrepreneur in residence there was appointed by the dean of the school, third largest university in Canada. And one of the things that we were noticing when we were building out our tech ecosystem, we're currently supporting 215 startups under this mandate, is that so many of our first-time founders, and we're talking about top 3 business school, you know, these founders who already come in with a lot of skill sets. They were even finding that it was so frustrating to be able to raise money, not knowing what the rules are, not knowing the resources, et cetera. And so a lot of the stuff that I've been doing there in that ecosystem for a bunch of years is building community. And so what that looks like to me is like, hey, when you've got somebody in the ecosystem, for example, something like Schulich Startups, who's successfully done around. So for example, I had a startup that just did a $3 million seed round. This was about 4 months ago. I knew that I had a pre-seed founder who was, I think, talking to a few of the same investors. And I said, hey, so-and-so, I just helped you with your round. I am connecting you with XYZ because I want the two of you to actually trade insights so that the information that you're getting about venture capital, who's got dry powder, et cetera, is actually still accessible. So that's some of the stuff that I've really seen with the power of community, is that I really believe as operators, and I think VCs too can be an advocate for this, is that hopefully founders know that they don't have to do it alone, and that there's other founders or people in the ecosystem that they could also talk to be able to get insights around raising around.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think that's kind of part of the reason why also this whole 2-day virtual kind of event is going on is, right, to educate and amplify all of the resources out there, whether you're in VC, in impact investing, a founder, an issuer, or even an investor. John, if you can, I know that you are very well versed in like mobilizing and building a community to tap into from an investor perspective. Maybe you can talk about, how you look at investors or shareholders from a customer or like a marketing perspective from an, recommendations that you might give to an issuer.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think it's important to start off with an anecdote of, what happens when a community is mobilized. And a favorite example that I like to give is a client of ours who's pre-FDA approval, but they, weekly get people from their community reaching out to literally go under the knife to be a test subject for them, right? So, that's the power of it when you can tap in to this community. And the way to mobilize them is you got to act way before you're ready to mobilize them. So the best ways that we see founders, right, and companies use their audience is continued communication with them. Because the worst thing you can do is, when you decide to raise, that's when you start communicating with them, right? You only call to ask for money, right? So what we see as best is the ongoing communications with that audience to keep them updated, right? And obviously there's some segmentation involved in that. Perhaps they are customers of yours, right? Or they had invested in the last round, or they were just a follower of the last round. So you do want to speak to those people differently. But I think the key there is ongoing updates to them, as well as substantive updates, right? Like being in somebody's inbox is sacred space, if you will, right? So when you get there, you want to do it with that in mind, that you should be speaking to something that's impactful when you do that. But we've seen a lot of success, and so when it is time to mobilize that community, it can really kickstart around, right? Because you could be a D2C brand, right? Like Brittany, going out to your audience, talking to them about your message, right? And how they can now take part and be an owner in this company, right? And there's a lot of power in that, because they can help kickstart your round, right? And get you some traction out of the gate. And particularly in equity crowdfunding, where you can tie in investor perks or early bird perks to really reward those people for being your community, for being customers previously, right? And then leverage that to tie them into the round. And again, ongoing updates are important throughout the lifetime of the campaign and after the campaign. So we're often working with founders to, think about the different segments, so the different types of audience that they have, and how you can keep them up to date, whether that's through webinars, email, SMS, et cetera, throughout the lifetime. So not just while you're raising.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that also goes kind of into, how we look at tapping into kind of that power of purpose, right? So approaching this less as if you do this, your dividends will be this. What you're really doing is you're really kind of getting an enthusiastic community around a mission-driven kind of message. So John, maybe you can share an anecdote around like a raise that really resonated with Doing Good, and how they kind of tapped into that like power of purpose to build on that.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think, starting with a stat is important, right? Where 6 out of 10 millennials are involved in impact investing, right? And they're doing that because it's more than just pride of ownership. They want to be part of influencing change, right? So that message is very often, told in a story, right? How do you convey your purpose, right? And the ways that we help teams do that is to really, turn that into a story, right? Because I could tell you about a company in 10 different data points, right? But that you get lost in that, right? But if I think about that as, a story arc and 10 different bus stops that I want you to be on, how do you move somebody from one bus stop to the next, right? And that can be mission driven, whether that's climate change, right? Or what Brittany and her team are doing, right? And the work they do in Ethiopia, right? But how do you take your investment opportunity and turn it into a story? And we'll often do that. It could be the doctor who created this technology and how he arrived at that, right? They'd much rather hear about that than the market size of that. Well, the market size is a subheadline there, but how do you get somebody to care about the market size is this doctor's initial insight into this archaic industry, and they rose up to create their own. And it's a bit of a David and Goliath story as well, right? Because there are all these incumbents and they couldn't get the funding that they needed initially, right? So you want to package that up and turn it into a story, because stories are what people learn from and invest in and get latched onto. And ultimately, to tie back to community, right? That's why they want to join your community as an investor or just an onlooker. It's because they like your story. It's not because they like your market size.
Exactly. And Brittany, I think like when I think about Parker Clay, and you having such a great kind of origin story, as it were, I think you can probably share with everyone what you went through from a storytelling perspective and how you really saw that as a key piece to kind of building the brand.
Right. I mean, from the very beginning, of Parker Clay, we have balanced sharing about impact and product at the same time. Our impact is it's a very hard thing we're tackling in Ethiopia with exploitation and trafficking, and matching that up with high quality premium leather bags. It can come across kind of heavy, right? In the same way where that is coming across with investment, and we're also talking about impact, and we're also talking about high quality bags, and knowing which times to share which aspect of the story and to bring it together. So I think right now, well, since the beginning, our omni-channel approach has been really what we're focusing on. All the aspects, like we have packaging cards for our investment piece, in addition to our normal storytelling with thanking our community, being a B Corp, included in every shipment. We have the same cards at our 4 retail stores. We have monthly emails that go out to our entire subscriber email list. And we also include it on footers in emails regularly. We do blogs, we include it in LinkedIn, multiple aspects. We're just starting paid ads as well, which we're like 5-6 months in now. So we're starting that, and we're really unifying the storytelling. I think what we're really working on now at this point, we're seeing that our storytelling has been a little bit lengthy and we need to be more direct with the customer. We have always used the word invest in the past, but like invest in a premium leather good that will last you a lifetime. So throwing the word invest around now in a different, in a different context, we're not sure it's coming across super clear or direct to our customer. So we're having to just relook at that a little bit and see how we can better communicate that.
Yeah, that's a great story. Cherry Rose, to put a bit of a different spin on this, I know that you had kind of really latched on to the mental health movement in the tech space. So maybe talk about kind of, that tactic of smart listening, and creating a community around a movement that you didn't actually have to create yourself from the ground up.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to share. And I think what's interesting in us talking about power of purpose, and I think we've been talking about how does it impact different stakeholders, right? And I think Brittany was talking about, hey, there's this very loyal customer base that's really passionate about the mission, or let's say we're rallying people around things like crowdfunding, or maybe even getting VCs on board. I feel like where I'm going to share from is actually what's been happening with limited partners, with LPs. It's actually been the coolest thing. So like right now with Renew VC, I've declared to everybody that I know, I plan in decades. So I'm always about moonshots. And this decade is really that I want venture capital to be the vehicle for disproportionate good on the planet. That's really what I believe. And what's been fascinating for me now, being on the VC side, is that myself and 2 of my other co-founders, we're leading our fundraising conversations as a VC firm. We're raising 50 million, a cap of 100. And what's been fascinating for me is actually the amount of LPs that reach out or excited about having a conversation with us because of the purpose, and sometimes also because of the personal brand of the VC. So Leah, you're mentioning a bit about the mental health work. So before I did Real Talk, I had spent about 5 years of my life leading a different organization that was called #Real Talk. It was the mental health movement for the tech industry. We were the first one in the space. This is like January 2018. And that piece of work, it was very impactful. It taught me a lot about the industry, about the kinds of conversations that people are having behind closed doors. And we were serving 40,000 people, during that peak, live events, masterminds, all kinds of mental health programming. And so what's been interesting for me as a VC is initially I thought, oh, I transitioned from Renew VC now to #Real Talk. I guess maybe that door is kind of closed now, or I guess I'm saying goodbye. But actually what's been interesting is now a lot of their LPs that I've been talking to who are passionate about investing in a VC fund that, we still have the classic asset management, but we're also about doing good and making sure that our founders are okay. A lot of them are actually kicking off the call saying, hey, I actually reached out and I wanted to talk to you specifically because I felt like what you were doing with Real Talk was so cool. And I love the fact that you're a VC that actually cares about founder mental health. And I can see how you're weaving that into your work with Renew VC. So I feel like when we talk about power of purpose, I know sometimes we talk about founders or we're talking about, VCs or other people, but I also feel like it's impacting as well, limited partners who are in the ecosystem.
I think it's a human thing, right? And we're, as a human, we like a good story. We want to do good. We want to get a return on the money while changing the world. And to John's earlier point, you really see that in the millennial. This next generation coming up is really kind of changing the face of investing. They're less interested in, what is my return? And they're divesting of, let's say, oil and gas, which is one of the, one of the big kind of trends that we're seeing. So let me move on to kind of tips, because I think we were talking like it's obvious if you're mission driven and you have a story around doing good that you should be telling that story. But I think we might all approach kind of the cadence of customer outreach slightly differently. So my background is marketing, and I'm going to just plant this seed with everyone here that it takes people 3 to 7 times to hear a message for it to actually be remembered. So maybe let's talk a little bit, John, about what you experience around, the repetitive retargeting, how many times you have to kind of get a message in front of someone, even if it's a compelling story, before they actually take action and break through the clutter.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's great to consider the frequency, right, as well as the medium. But to start off, the medium could be, it's an email or it's your website, right? So you could have the most compelling pitch ever, but if it's too long, right? I know Brittany was talking about this before, right? Where it's like, how do you make that more concise, and really nail that down? So it's about frequency, medium, as well as brevity, right? And positioning that. One of the best tactics that we see, right, is trying to, bring people along on those bus stops that I mentioned before, right? So picture those as, 6 seconds, little bits of attention that you're trying to capture, right? And, it's not just one bus stop. You want to string together, 5 of those, right? So how can you get them from one to the other, right? And that could be on a website. It could be on the email, right? Or it could be the webinar. So, what we find as a really helpful tactic is to try to, drive traffic, right, from an ad to a website and get them to sign up for an email campaign that continues that education, right? So each email acts as a bus stop, right? And then having something like that culminate in a webinar where you can then be more one-to-one with this audience, right? Because oftentimes, we find ourselves communicating with somebody who's really excited about XYZ technology or company, right? But they haven't invested yet. So you should think about the medium as to which you're communicating that, right? Where it's an email. Well, some people really want that one-to-one trust, right? So I think, a really strong tactic for that is having some sort of email educational sequence that culminates in a webinar where you can help answer questions, right? Help provide, the face to the name that was just in the email before and a bit more of a personal touch. But yeah, a lot of our strategy, Lee, to your initial point, is around, how do we get in front of people in those different touch points and make them substantive and build trust through them.
Brittany, would you add anything to that and some of the campaigns that you've run and what you've observed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing we've learned is that no one can really tell the story better than Ian, the co-founder, and I. So really getting out ourselves and doing podcasts and sharing directly to people. Sometimes people just want to be asked to be or invited personally from us. And so to have those opportunities where, they might think it's too far out there, they don't quite understand the ease of this opportunity and what they can be a part of. So I think that's one of the main things. I think also, brevity in how we're communicating and just leave people with enough that makes them want to click and link back to the investment page or to leave their email. And on anything, whether that's on the social ads, you don't want to give them too much, but you also want to be clear enough to pique their interest. And that is one thing we're refining as well, because I think the first couple months of starting this, there was a lot of confusion around what's actually going on and how we're doing this. So I think, starting in a different place, like I know if we would have kind of known what we know now, starting out, we would have had our audiences a little more strategized as well. So.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Like a segmentation plan a little bit? Top tier?
Yeah, we would have. Yes, exactly. And we would have had that plan on how to communicate with them throughout the entire year. We do have different email flows for if they've been a VIP customer or if they've just signed up with on the investment email page. But really the amount you check in with them after they first signed in, now what's there, there's a lot of different flows that can be created off of that. And just making sure we have the right connection points for those customers to keep them moving and really keep bringing the information that attracted them in the first place. We find that when people really get the impact of what we're doing, once they get to the email sign up, they're a lot quicker to convert. So we have found that to be pretty effective in, people are purchasing or people are committing right now because they want to be a part of our purpose and they want to be a part of our impact. And so that has been really effective in our storytelling. But again, like to continue creating new customers, you got to keep bringing more into your pool of customers. You don't want to burn out what you have created in the first few months, but keep creating a larger VIP list, a larger community that would be interested in investing.
Yeah, I think I would just echo that by saying it's never one and done. So some issuers come in and they think, oh, it's going to be a campaign and we're going to do a blast and we're going to do a raise. And we think of it as this is the first of many raises. Please think of this community as a living, breathing thing that you're plan on managing it forever. Yeah. Cherry Rose, I know that you love a good story, but as being kind of on the VC side of things, you want founders to master their metrics as well. So tell us a little bit about kind of tips for a mission-driven founder to not forget that aspect as well.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. I think one of the things that comes up, especially when I'm meeting a mission-driven founder and we're talking about their fundraising strategy, that it's so important. Let's say we're looking at the materials, we're looking at the pitch deck, we're looking at the investor outreach email, we're looking at the data rooms. I'll focus on the pitch deck for this conversation. That it's important that even though you're a mission-driven business, that the business model and the entire story that you're sharing to the VC is like rock solid, and that when you're actually going through the experience of the pitch deck itself, it's so much of it's like storytelling. And it's almost like the feeling for me as a VC, like when I'm hearing the pitch deck, like especially like a really good pitch, like the founder nailed it. They've obviously tested it with some other people in order to get to this kind of positioning. As I'm experiencing the pitch deck, the feeling that's strongest, I think, for a VC is that, oh, as I'm going deeper into hearing your story, my conviction is building for you as to like why you're like the winner for this category, why it's you, and also like the why now. So for example, when I train my founders, I'm just thinking about Schulich Startups. I run our fundraising and advisory services. My startups have raised 44 million in 2 years. And the way that we train our founders, the slides that I'm most picky about, definitely the problem slide. About when I'm looking at this problem slide, just the slide as it is, can I tell what's the exact problem that you're trying to solve? So for example, the industries identified, things like that. And also like who exactly is the customer avatar? So even if you're saying you're doing like some kind of fintech solution that's a B2B play, like who is the stakeholder that you're actually talking to when you're thinking about making the sale? And then the other part that I think is important as well, for especially for something mission driven, is that the business model, the traction slide, and the go-to-market slides, like those three actually are meant to be building, like they're meant to be cohesive together. So for example, if I'm talking about and I'm selling this vision to this VC, like, hey, this is our mission on the planet. And by the way, this is how we're going to be monetizing. We figured out the revenue strategy. This is the model we're picking. We're going to start off with a B2C play. But then we've got this B2B pillar that we're launching, in 6 months. So you've got like the business model. Then when you go into the traction slide, the metrics that you're sharing about your initial proof points should make sense with the business model that you're proposing. And then of course, when you get into the go-to-market strategy, now you're explaining, okay, this is my plan for the next 4 quarters. This is how we're actually going to, we're going to launch in these 2 cities first. And then afterwards, we're going to launch in these 5 cities. And then afterwards, we're going to go to this market segmentation next. And so that's the piece that I feel like I want to highlight in this conversation. I love mission-driven founders. I was one myself, and I definitely learned it the hard way because I've done stuff in ed tech and mental health, and my family's been in the crypto space. But I think at the end of the day, at least if we're talking about VCs and angel investors, those particular stakeholders, they are asset managers. And so if we can make sure that we lock down on the metrics and that like that business model, we've we've got that logic going on and it looks good. And on top of that, you add a mission-driven story, like that's a really powerful combination.
Yeah. I want to touch on what you said as, they're asset managers, because I know, Jonathan, you and I have had some conversations around community. When you're building your startup and you're building your brand, the community is your next asset class, whether they're customers or shareholders. So maybe can you share with the group kind of what your thoughts are around that and how that's the new evolution of kind of not just thinking of where's my revenue and where are my subscriptions, but thinking of the community as an asset class?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll try not to go too much on a rant about distribution and how that's changing, right? Because it certainly is, right? Whether you see folks like Serena Williams, right? Or Kim K with their fund, or like Mr. Beast and his audience, right? He owns this audience and now can go direct to them, right? So the rules of distribution are changing, which I think is fantastic. But it goes back to the community bit, because distribution is, I guess, like the operational pipes as to which you can reach an audience, right? So if you've built that up over time, you can leverage that. For us, leverage happens in the form of, raising capital through that audience. And we see this be particularly powerful for companies that have, focused on building community over several years in a series of raises, where you can go back to them with traction and updates, right? It's, here's what we did last time. And you'll see people reinvest. We've seen people invest 8 times over, 5 campaigns, right? So, and some of those, they were reinvesting based on updates that were shared during the campaign, right? But you can build a really powerful snowballing effect from that. And, we've seen anywhere from 20 to 30% of raises done just from community, right? And that's 15, $20 million capital raises that are done. So significant portions of capital. And when you think about equity crowdfunding, and if there's a marketing exercise involved in that, you need marketing ad spend for that. So the community can really jumpstart that to help you get the message out there to more potential investors and grow your community. So, we're really big on that. So, that's why we focus, even in between raises, how are we updating this group? It could be, a quarterly update, right? It could be a new partnership. To some extent, anything is grist for the mill, if you will. But to own the rails of distribution, most common through the medium of email, right, is really important and impactful, and a direct line of communication to this group that can be, like I said, hugely impactful for the raise to the tune of 20 to 30% of the dollar volume coming in, just being from that community who, you took a little time to continue to talk to over the lifetime of your company, and they're excited to get those updates. They want that, right? So, we see that as a huge part of it, and it's why we focus so much of our marketing strategy around planning those segmentations, whether that's during the raise, after the raise, and before the raise. It all ends up being, one big flat timeline.
Awesome. So if I can kind of open this up, I want to make sure we have time for questions if there are any. But Brittany, maybe we can start with you. If you could do it all over again, would you change anything? And what would you change?
Yeah, I mean, we were hoping to start in October, and we ended up starting in November. And so I think obviously it would have been a little bit earlier. I would have changed the start so it wasn't so close to the holidays. I would have also, we didn't know exactly what we were coming into. And if I were to do it over again with the knowledge I have now, I would have planned that customer journey out for the entire year ahead of time, or the entire 10 months, scheduled in all the webinars, the events we're going to have, everything, like project manage it all out ahead of time, so it doesn't sneak up on us, and our communication is super consistent, because I think you just can't have enough content. It's just the more, that the customer can have it in their face, like you said, 3 to 7 times, the better. And I really think motivating the customer to share it with other people. Referrals are really big. And like you guys said, to reinvest. I mean, we often forget that someone that has invested can invest again. And so like some of our top customers are people who purchase multiple times a year and refer others. Why not look at investment the same way?
Yeah, great point. Terry Rose.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that question. I feel like for myself, it's actually to reach out for mentorship sooner, and also to actually do my research ahead of time before I start making blanket requests to a lot of people. And I'm just thinking about like the early days of me being a founder. So even like I remember in the early days thinking, okay, I'm doing a B2B play. Let me just reach out to different successful founders who made it. But then some of the founders I was asking, for example, they were doing like a B2C freemium, or for example, oh, that founder is doing something in marketplace, and like those models. And even the way you communicate that in a pitch deck, it's not the same as if you're doing like B2B SaaS, for example. So yeah, if I was to do it over again, definitely reach out to mentors sooner to get the right information at the right time. And also definitely being specific and not just like going to everybody.
Yeah, I agree. If we don't have any questions, I want to pick the panel's brain about where you see the industry heading. Like overall funding for good. What have you heard? I know that we're building a network here, so we probably have, an optimistic view. But Jonathan, maybe you can chime in here. Give us maybe your 5-year best bet.
Ooh, 5-year best bet. Well, not the futurist on the panel here, I will say, but the what I do like, and now I get to go into my rant about distribution, right? I think that'll continue to change, and it's interesting. I think we'll even start to see it on YouTube, where formerly that was a good platform to build an audience on, right? But I think there's going to be a shift around that where um, YouTube is trying to monetize more through things like their version of stories and reels, et cetera, right? It's everything is this like for you recommendation. So I think the ability to collect an audience organically will be a little bit tougher on those platforms, but that's YouTube specific, but it does go back to distribution, what it means to own your audience, right? That could be, your mentor group that you've, worked hard to curate, right? And keep in touch with, or it could be your email list of customers and community. I think building that up as quickly as possible and treating them well in there is huge, because distribution is going to continue to change as ad platforms and algorithms change. So the best defense against that is owning the rails to those communications, to the extent that you can, own the email rails. Other folks do, but it is the most direct line of contact. Maybe a Discord group, like community, like that. So yeah, that's something that I see in the next 5 years as an important shift, as these different tech companies are all competing. It's going to change the rails of distribution. So if you can own that audience, incredibly important.
How about the futurist weighs in, Cherry Rose? What do you think the industry, and not just VC, but the whole industry of raising capital and all of the, new fintechs like Dealmaker coming in and changing the space?
Yeah, I feel like the trend overall in the ecosystem is like diversity in different forms across different levels of community. So for example, one of the stuff that I'm passionate about at Renew VC is that community is not just the founders, and it's not just the customers, and it's not just the VCs. We also need to think about, what does that community look like? For example, stuff at the LP level. So for example, the reason why I'm a VC and really excited is that I feel like we actually need more diversity in the LP base. And a lot of the ways that even you raise a fund, most raises are often very private. Like Renew VC, we're incorporated as a 506c, meaning that we can actually tell people publicly while we're raising that we're actually raising the fund. And that's intentional. Like, I want to see LPs or other people that are invited who've not usually been invited to this asset class. And when I say this asset class, it's VC, but it also includes being an angel. It can also include crowdfunding, because people have different entries into this ecosystem. But once they have that participation, then they can participate at different levels over the years. So I just feel like that's a trend that's going to just continue to grow.
Yeah, I would agree. Brittany, anything that you see, or even just like what do you see Parker Clay? What are Parker Clay's goals in 5 years?
Yeah, our goal is to change an industry, really manufacturing, and showing people that purchasing a product and caring about the people and caring about the environment is the direction that we need to go. And I believe that our community is with us, and we believe it's going in that direction. So in the same way with investment, to create, trade over aid, and people, like, I love that you can invest in impact, and it is often more beneficial than donating to aid that is very temporary and meets an immediate need, which is, always necessary, but not to continue with aid. They need to move into trade. And so to really be able to invest in that and to build economies empowering the people is, super important. And we see it going that direction, and just raising the transparency and standards of manufacturing and the fashion industry.
I love that. Great quote, moving from aid to trade. I think that's fabulous, Britt. I'm going to steal it, and I will trademark it for you. So I'll give you a penny every time we use it. We are getting the warning, so there's about 40 seconds. If anyone has a question for the panel, now is the time. You can come off mute and shout it out, or you can type it in the chat. otherwise, I want to thank all of the guests for joining me, Brittany, Cherry Rose, Jonathan. Oh, we do have a question. What do you guys think about crowdfunding building the African economy? Brittany, I'll let you address that in 15.
Yes, I think it brings awareness also to the industry ability there. We have an amazing Ethiopian leadership team that are co-owners in Parker Clay, and